Welcome to Learning from Success, improving outcomes with new PrEP options. This continuing medical education series highlights HIV prevention at the Owen Clinic in San Diego, California. The Owen Clinic is the largest, most comprehensive primary care center in San Diego for individuals living with and at risk for HIV. They provide inclusive, whole-person care from professionals who respect the beliefs, preferences, and values of their patients.
Hi, I'm Jill Blumenthal. Welcome to Learning from Success, improving outcomes with new PrEP options. The recent availability of injectable PrEP given every 2 months is a tremendous advancement in HIV prevention. So in this episode, we'll be discussing injectable PrEP at the Owen Clinic in San Diego. Joining me today are my wonderful friends and colleagues, Alan File, Montse Anguiano, and Christian Turner. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Hello. So I was just thinking about 2021, and I think we all had really exciting events in our lives in 2021, personally. But I think a collective thing that happened for all of us that brought us much joy was the approval of long-acting injectable PrEP for HIV prevention. I think I still remember where I was when it got the approval. It really was very exciting. Do you share my joy, and what about long-acting PrEP makes you so excited or happy?
Yeah, for me it was really just marking a new moment in kind of the evolution of PrEP. We haven't really had any other options other than a daily tablet for most patients. The two versions of oral PrEP that are available are pretty closely related and share some ingredients. So there are patients that cannot tolerate either of those. So just having another agent available was a big deal with PrEP. And then having another way of delivering it is also a big deal because it might address some of the concerns that we have in terms of adherence or compliance, effectiveness in certain populations. So to me, it just marked a new phase in what we can offer in PrEP.
Patients on oral PrEP sometimes express a desire to switch to an injectable option, as did this patient.
I took the oral PrEP. Only major issue was just remembering to take it every day on a daily basis. But for the most part, I was pretty good about just taking it daily and making sure just drink the water I need to drink as well too. But it did get cumbersome at some point. I hated the fact of just taking a pill every day. So that was something I wish I didn't have to do as often.
So we've had a lot of patients show interest in changing to injectable PrEP. And I think there are multiple reasons why the patients are choosing to go that route. But I think the number one is remembering to take the pill. For whatever reason, that being busy schedules or just not being a routine or because you have friends around or because you have family around, I think just having to remember to take the pill is kind of a burden. So I think it's just the freedom of knowing that you're protected, knowing that you're on PrEP, but not having to think about it all the time.
I think we were at a huge advantage as a clinic, again, that has historically served patients living with HIV. We'd been doing long-acting injectable ARVs with rilpivirine and cabotegravir, and we had this really well-developed program that had been going on for, I guess, a couple of years. I mean, I think we're now, as a clinic, and I think a lot of clinics that serve patients living with or at risk for HIV, injectables are everywhere now, or they should be everywhere, and there are other injectable medications that we give. So I think what we also saw was just the need for almost, clinic time specifically for injectables. And Montse, you had a lot of involvement in the nurse visits that were created, but that took some time to get that developed. And what do you think we learned from our experience with long-acting injectable ARVs for what we did for what we've been doing for PrEP?
I think there was a system already put in place for our HIV injectables that we just had to create a whole new schedule for our new PrEP injectables. It was a lot of teaching. It was having the patients come, scheduling them, because now that was another appointment that they were coming, not just to see you, they were coming for their injections.
Right.
There's a window that you have to come in. We have to monitor them for 15 minutes after, so that's a big challenge. Sometimes, like, I've had it before, I need to go.
Right.
It's like, at least your first injection, let me monitor you. Make sure that everything's okay,
Right.
Explaining, going over the side effects, making sure that they're okay with it.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's important to point out that this does require a different program than oral
Right.
PrEP. It's a different visit schedule, it's different labs being ordered, different types of appointments, and you do have to track that the patient is coming in on time.
Yeah, but I do think it gives us this advantage of seeing patients more frequently and maybe catching other things. But yes, it completely changes the flow of things for patients, and it does require, more nursing staff, more provider availability, more and more pharmacy support.
And I know one of the things that we talked about when we started doing injectables in general was, how many things can we combine for the patient, right? To diminish the amount of time and the amount of visits that the patient is coming to clinic. And I think there are a number of patients that were able to do that.
And
Yeah.
the patients love that.
Yeah.
That's one of their biggest compliments. It's like, it's a one-time shop here. They come, they see you, they see the pharmacist, they see a social worker, and then guess what? You're left with your appointment. They're picking up the prescriptions. So,
And I think alternating the visits, the way we've been trying to do is to do one visit with a nurse for the injection, and then a follow-up visit with the provider and the injection during that visit, and then again a nurse visit. So just alternating so that the patient's coming here not as many times.
We do keep a really close eye on our injectable PrEP patients,
Right.
making sure that they're hitting the window and making sure that they feel comfortable reaching out to us with questions, because just as it's new for us, it's new for everybody.
Yeah.
So again, we don't want patients to have to try to figure out the answer for themselves, because not all the information is out there.
Consistent, ongoing communication with patients is something the Owen Clinic strives for. This patient shares his experience with his first injectable PrEP dose.
I believe when I had my first injectable, I would say it was sort of painful, but he said that after the first couple shots, it's very uncomfortable and can be very uncomfortable. And he made himself very available to any phone calls or any kind of situations where, hey, like I need a consult about what my symptoms were. He encouraged me to give him a heads up, like, hey, like I feel this, X, Y, Z.
We kind of decided very early on in starting this injectable that one of the things we wanted to do is really guide people through this program, because for most people this is a very, very different experience. They're either used to taking a daily tablet, coming in a certain number of times, every few months, and this injectable program is very different. So we do have these consultations kind of ahead of time before the injection, try to prepare them for what to expect. And then we also follow up with them a couple days after the first couple of injections, just to see if there is any concerns that they might have, any new questions, really making sure that they know that we're available to help them through this. And then, as they get more and more accustomed to the injections, their need for these extra reminders may fall off, or the need for reaching out and asking new questions, that may disappear as well. But we like to establish right up front with the patient that they have an outlet, somebody to reach out to answer any questions or concerns that they might have.
What's the experience been like with insurance and coverage of cabotegravir?
Unpredictable. We have regional calls with other providers, monthly, and it's just a constant update of what do you know, what's your experience. And the sad part of it, and I think this was the same with injectable ART, is every insurance is different. There's very little that is consistent across the board. And PrEP offers in a new wrinkle into these things where some insurances will only pay for an oral agent. They consider it a preventative or elective type of service and not something that is needed for treatment the way injectable ART is.
Yeah.
So it's evolving. We're seeing a trend towards more coverage as opposed to less coverage, but it is challenging.
That's something the patients usually ask is, I wasn't paying anything for my oral prep. Am I going to have to pay? Because sometimes they have a visit to come see a nurse, to come see a provider. They have the $20 copay that they wouldn't have if they just went to the pharmacy and picked up oral prep.
Right.
So you have to take all those things into consideration. One thing that we learned from the injectable ARTs was there are copay programs, patient assistance programs through manufacturers that usually we use on the pharmacy side, but we were able to kind of adjust our system and deal with UCSD and billing in a way that even if it was done as a medical benefit, we are able to build that patient assistance program for medical bills. So for the copay, for the injection, or for the administration fee, there are amounts that we can still do. So again, all we're trying to do is offset what the patient would have to pay out of pocket so that it's still comparable to taking oral prep. Does it happen all the time? No. Sometimes we're able to do it, and sometimes we're not able to do it, and then it's a matter of patient preference, what they want to do.
But I think we still have issues with access. We've talked about that. We are a clinic that's only open from 8 to 4:30. What do you hope to see with what we'll be able to do with long-acting cabotegravir in the future?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is access, and there are restrictions on this medication that you might not have with oral prep. And this is part of the discussion of understanding your patient and being honest with them about what it is and what it isn't. So those requirements that they come in for administration, this isn't something that they can do at home.
Right.
So that's going to lock out a certain number of people that maybe can't schedule that. And those are maybe populations that we've been having difficulty with to begin with.
Right.
So that it can be a little bit frustrating, trying to find other ways to maybe get administrations out to patients in different environments, meeting them where they live, or contracting with locations, nurses, doctors, pharmacies out in the world that might be up to doing this down the line. So really exploring different options for getting the medication into our patients safely.
As a research institution, we are definitely involved in things like this. I know there have been lots of researchers interested in sort of this big shift over to long-acting injectables. But the reality, there's still a reality. There's insurance, there's access, there's transportation. So how do you overcome some of those things? And I think a lot of people have different ideas, which you've mentioned, but what actually ends up being feasible? How do you do it? How do you continue to pay for those things in the future? And I think we're still, in the early stages of it.
I think from a provider perspective, oral prep is easier to manage. I think there is a lot of background management that needs to happen with the injectable prep, and there is a lot of commitment from the provider, from the clinic, and from the patient, understanding that you're taking something that's going to be in your body for 12 months, and you do have to be conscious if you're going to stop taking it and then engage in sexual practices, that you still have to be taking some other kind of prep, understanding that if you're gonna go out of town and go to Europe for 3 months, that you might have to bridge with something else and then come back to do your injection. There's all this information that needs to be shared. So I feel like we do it in a very conscious way, and informational way for the patient, so that they know it is a commitment on both parts, right?
In one sense, I think clinically, the idea is that any injectable medication, providers should love that because they absolutely know adherence. But we also have to consider what's really working for the patient. And I think that's where we've introduced a lot of different layers of analyzing and evaluating patients. And then you have to have that frank discussion of what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks, address some of those misconceptions that they might have about the medication. I think that will become a bigger issue for us as it becomes kind of marketed to the public.
Right.
It's starting already. So we're starting to see patients that are calling in specifically for They call in, I want to set up an appointment for PrEP, and then when I start doing the intake, they're like, nope, I want injectable PrEP. That's where I'm coming for.
Right.
So it's starting to happen.
And we want, people to get what they want, but obviously we have to, this is very much a shared decision between, providers and patients.
Responding to individual concerns patients may have about injectable PrEP is a priority for professionals at the Owen Clinic. Here is one example with a transgender patient.
And then the pharmacist from UCSD called me, and the pharmacist just gave me a rundown on the efficacy of it and what it should feel like to receive the injection and potential after effects. And I just had the question about female bodies using it versus male bodies. And he reassured me actually that the injection has more research about the efficacy in vaginal use and stuff versus the pill. And that really was the deciding factor for me. I was like, cool, sign me up then.
One of the things we try to do in discussing the injectable PrEP is giving the patient every opportunity to review what they've been told, come back and ask questions. So we kind of try to expose them in a couple of different ways with it. Oftentimes our provider is the first one that discusses it with them during a visit, kind of establishes that this might be appropriate for them, and lays a little bit of the groundwork. But then they also give them the opportunity to follow up with me, one of the pharmacists here, just to have a phone call with them so that they've got a little bit of extra time outside of their normal visit to kind of discuss some of the issues that may have come up as they stepped back and thought about it a little bit longer.
I think though also we do try to, we want patients to drive things, but I think also, we've talked about this with patients who may be at lower risk. Maybe cabotegravir isn't what we're recommending for them. And patients, ultimately can say, no, this is what I'd really like to do. But I think we've had frank conversations with patients who've been on oral PrEP, and they may not really need to be on it anymore for various reasons, but it makes them feel safe, makes them feel protected. I think we know that injectable PrEP isn't the answer for everyone, and I think that's what's very valuable about having people that are knowledgeable about this. We're not just trying to convert everyone from oral to injectable PrEP.
We had a number of patients that they express interest, we talk to them, and they say, no thank you,
Right.
I'm fine to be where I'm at.
Right.
But again, they got the information, and it just wasn't for them. Right?
Yeah.
And this is where I think that relationship that we establish with the patients is important. If we come out and we're honest, across the board, and say, you know what, I don't hear a real need here, or I don't think this is the best option for you because you miss a lot of appointments. Coming right out and saying this may be an issue for us with this type of therapy, that engages the patient in understanding what is important about it and what isn't, and maybe changing things around so they can access it.
Yeah.
No, I think you can see, but by the way we've been talking about this here, that this is new for us. Now think about the primary care offices that are outside our clinic. This is really new for them. So I think one important component of this program is that the primary care pharmacy program will be a support system for the primary care physicians that are being asked by their patients, can I do injectable PrEP?
And I think one of the biggest things that we all know we want to do is ultimately expand the reach of injectable PrEP so that people who have never heard of it and really don't understand their risk for HIV, maybe have never, it's not brought up in their homes, it hasn't been brought up in school. That's the population we ultimately want to really get this to. And we know that as a clinic, as a university, as a hospital system, we do have a lot of work to do from that perspective. But to me, that's the ultimate goal, is to get it out to the person that doesn't know they need it, that it would ultimately benefit them for. So thanks everyone again for this great conversation. It's nice that we now have this latest addition to our HIV prevention toolkit, and I know that there are more coming. So thanks for joining me today.
We hope you found this activity useful and educational. To receive continuing education credit and to download your printable certificate, please return to the activity webpage and click on the Claim Credit button associated with this episode. Your certificate will be available to print upon successful completion of the brief post-test and evaluation.